The 1986 season was not a good one whatsoever for the St. Louis Cardinals. In 1960, the Cardinals played their first season under the Arch, moving from Chicago. And yet, after a quarter century, and after many bad seasons, and I truly mean many bad seasons, seeing as the Cards had never won a playoff game in St. Louis, or even hosted one, the 1986 season might have been the worst of the bunch, which is saying a lot. The Cardinals finished the year with an abysmal 4-11-1 record, which was their worst winning percentage since moving to Chicago, and was their worst winning percentage in franchise history since they went 2-10 in 1959. Things went off the rails quickly for the Cardinals after they lost their first 5 games of the season. Started with just 1 win in their first 8 games, and won just 2 of their first 12 games. Watching the Cardinals felt like a form of torture. The team scored single digits 5 times, scored 10 points or less in 7 of their games, so roughly half of them, and scored under 14 points in 9 of their 16 games. Unsurprisingly, the Cardinals finished the season with the worst offense in football, averaging an abysmal 13.6 points per game at a time when the average team was scoring well over 20. So the Cardinals were averaging a touchdown per game less than the average team in football. Watching the Cardinals play the sport and then watching other teams play the sport was like watching Picasso paint versus watching a 5-year-old paint who learned what finger painting was for the first time a couple of hours ago. It was like the Cardinals could do absolutely nothing right on the field. And as it turns out, the same applied off the field, because the Cardinals struggled from a broadcasting standpoint, or at least one of the main broadcast affiliates of the Cardinals. Because during Week 5, in this game right here, a game against the New York Giants, something crazy happened that deserves a deep dive all these years later, when a broadcaster committed one of the Cardinals' sins, pun completely intended, of broadcasting. Nobody wanted to watch the Cardinals play, and nobody was allowed to watch the Cardinals play, except for 9 minutes due to an insane glitch that left people up in arms and left people more frustrated than they would have been otherwise. Because it's better to never experience something than to get a taste of something and have it yanked away from you suddenly with no rhyme or reason whatsoever. Because this is the story behind one of the craziest broadcasting controversies that you probably never heard of before, and one of the craziest broadcasting controversies of the entire 1986 NFL season. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you probably never heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that CBS stood for Cardinals Broadcasting Slip-Up. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and what exactly went wrong, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, how the game was going, and what the rules and regulations were around the NFL at this time. Because something like this, quite literally, could not happen today, because said guardrails do not exist. It's October 5th, 1986. It's Week 5 of the NFL season. And as we're in the second quarter of the year, we've got an NFC East battle on our hands at Busch Stadium between the New York Giants and the St. Louis Cardinals. 4 weeks into the season, and the Cardinals were winless, sitting ugly at 0-4 with just 40 points scored and being one of just 3 teams in the NFL, alongside the Green Bay Packers and Indianapolis Colts, yet to have a win at this point. St. Louis boasted the 4th worst offense in the league, the 3rd worst defense in the conference, the 2nd worst point differential in the conference, and they had to run the table or hope for some sort of miracle in order to salvage their season. No team in NFL history had ever started a season off with an 0-4 record and made it to the playoffs, and it was looking incredibly unlikely that the Cardinals were going to be the first to rewrite history and break the curse, as there were 8 teams at 3-1 or better in the NFC, fighting for 5 spots, with Washington leading the NFC East at 4-0, and with their next opponent, the New York Giants, looking like one of the best teams in football with a 3-1 record. The Giants entered this game as heavy favorites, unsurprisingly. And if the Cardinals couldn't pull off the stunning upset, then they'd be 0-5, and their season would be truly dead in the water. And unsurprisingly, a lot of people did not want to watch the Cardinals play football. Turns out, when you've got an owner who kind of sucks, when you've got a team that really sucks, and when your future as a team is up in the air, seeing as the Cardinals were in relocation talks throughout the mid-'80s that would eventually materialize with a move to Arizona after the 1987 season, where they reside today, people don't want to spend their hard-earned money and time on that. The capacity of Busch Stadium was somewhere around 50,000 seats for football back in 1986. And this game against the Giants did not draw anywhere close to that. Not surprised that people didn't want to watch an anemic offense try and play football against a team that was heavily favored and pay for the ticket, parking, and concessions, and everything else under the sun. Now today, this wouldn't be a big deal. Today, every game is televised, regardless of how many tickets get sold. But in 1986, this was a problem. For roughly the past decade and a half, the NFL had a rule in place that said that a game could not be televised locally if it was not sold out 72 hours before kickoff. In other words, if a game took place on Sunday at 1 o'clock and your stadium held 60,000 people, you needed to sell all 60,000 seats by Thursday at 1 o'clock, or else the game would not be televised locally. The incentive for this was to get people to go to the game, because when the rule was enacted, local revenue like gate receipts and stadium revenue was a huge part of the pie, and the NFL knew that the television experience was superior to that of the in-stadium experience. Today, the inverse is true, and things like gate receipts and stadium revenue make up a sliver of the pie chart compared to the money that the league is making on television. So all the games get televised now because it's better for the league. And the higher the ratings are, the more money the league makes, even if they take a hit every now and then with the in-stadium revenue. Now, a team could ask for an extension on this if they were close to selling out. If there were a couple hundred seats left by the deadline, you could get an extension to get the blackout lifted. But the Cardinals were nowhere close to selling out this game that you've been watching. If they needed to sell 50,000 tickets, they weren't even across the 40,000 mark. And by the time the game kicked off, just 40,562 fans were in attendance at Busch Stadium. This meant that the game was going to be blacked out locally. Fans across the country and Giants fans in New York could watch the game. But if you were in St. Louis or were within a 75-mile radius of the city, you couldn't watch the game over your local CBS affiliate, which in this case was KMOV. You could try and get a signal illegally by manipulating an antenna. You could try driving outside the 75-mile radius and could watch the game at a motel or a bar outside the area. You could go to the game and shell out the money to buy a ticket, or you could listen on the radio. But if you wanted to watch the game locally on TV, you were out of luck and couldn't see the Cardinals stink once again offensively and trail 13-6 midway through the fourth quarter, as you've been able to tell from these highlights of the game. However, if you had your television set on CBS and had KMOV on while waiting for the late game between the Dallas Cowboys and the Denver Broncos to get underway, you were in for a surprise. Because with the Cardinals trailing 13-6, KMOV started doing this. They started showing the game that was blacked out. They showed the Giants-Cardinals game. Midway through the fourth quarter, in a competitive game, viewers in St. Louis were treated to the game that they were not allowed to get and never supposed to get. And sure enough, as soon as the game was shown on television, the Cardinals were doing something that they hadn't done all season. They forced a 3-and-out, and they were looking good offensively, and were looking like a team that actually knew how to move the ball down the field. Somehow, some way, The Cardinals were looking poised to pull off the upset and give the Giants a fight. As you're watching with this drive, Neil Lomax completed a pass to Earl Farrell. Otis Anderson had a couple of nice runs in what turned out to be his final game with the Cardinals before getting traded to the team on the other side, the New York Giants. And then, on third down near midfield, Neil Lomax, who was struggling all year, made one of the best throws of his career when he hit his wide receiver, J.T. Smith, down the sideline for a 45-yard gain to get them in a goal-to-go situation. The crowd was going nuts, and Cardinal fans who never thought they'd be able to watch this game were now watching the Cardinals on TV potentially pull off the upset and get their first win of the season because of a major screw-up on the part of the CBS affiliate. And then, the game was gone. For 9 minutes, Cardinal fans who watched KMOV got to see their team play, only to have it ripped away from them. Obviously, this was never supposed to air on TV, and once someone realized the mistake and realized something was wrong, they had to cut the game off or face steep penalties and punishments. Just as things went wrong for Cardinal fans who were furious as to why the game was no longer on their TV screen, things went wrong for the Cardinals afterwards, as they did not score on the drive, and the Giants won the game by that same scoreline of 13-6. As Lou Tevlin, the sports producer for KMOV, said on this incident, "Everything's computerized with the network. I was watching the feed of the game in our studios. About 9 minutes of the game was on the air." And as another employee of KMOV, Dennis Sheehan, said on the aftermath of this, there were a lot of calls from viewers wondering why their telecast was cut off. Obviously, you can't expect the average viewer to know about the blackout rule, and you can't expect the average viewer to act rationally when a game that they're watching and getting invested in gets cut off without any rhyme or reason whatsoever and without any warning, especially when no message flashed across the bottom of the screen informing viewers as to why this happened in the first place. For Cardinal fans who didn't know any better, this was like their version of the Heidi game between the New York Jets and the Oakland Raiders back in 1968. The funny part about an incident like this is that if KMOV never showed the game in the first place, they wouldn't have gotten these calls. The fact that they showed the game and then cut it off, that allowed all hell to break loose. Why wasn't the game on at the start? Why did you have to cut away from the game early? What happened to my TV? A lot of questions, and KMOV was completely screwed. Every game after this one for the Cardinals got blacked out, with the team never even coming close to selling out the stadium for the remainder of the 1986 season, which is unsurprising considering the fact that the team stunk, the games got more meaningless, the quality of football got worse, and the weather got worse. And from everything I could tell, an incident like this didn't happen for the remainder of the season. If KMOV wasn't supposed to show the Cardinals game, then they did not show the Cardinals game. Obviously, what happened during this game right here was a glitch and was never supposed to happen. There was no malicious intent, and while we never got any comments from technical supervisors about what went wrong, it was clear that someone programmed something the wrong way, and it led to the broadcast being shown, with a mistake being rectified a few minutes later. But this broadcast summed up being a Cardinals fan early on in 1986. Not watchable, then they suck you in, and it's watchable and exciting. And then, just as you have hope, it's not watchable again, and you're angry. This would have been a story either way, whether the game was close or a blowout. But the fact that the game was finally shown, right as the Cardinals had a chance, and after their best play of the day, and maybe the best player of their season, knocking on the doorsteps of the end zone, it gets removed and can't be seen again, just feels like a fitting metaphor in so many ways. At least KMOV didn't have to worry about accidentally showing any games if they weren't allowed to due to the blackout rule from 1988 to 1997. Because on this October day in 1986, there was a big screw-up involving the Big Red. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.